Donald Trump is about to give a commencement address at Liberty University. My panel and I will have a live analysis of that speech. But first, some congressional Democrats have been using the I word in the wake of Donald Trump's decision to fire Jim Comey. And while impeachment still remains, as Senator Blumenthal said, a distant possibility, Democrats are pursuing other ways to hold Trump accountable. 4 Senate Democrats on Friday asked the DOJ to open a new probe into whether Trump interfered with the FBI's investigation of his campaign ties to Russia. And over in the House, Democrats are calling Trump's bluff on his tweet warning Comey about tapes of their dinner conversation. Congressman John Conyers and Elijah Cummings sent a letter to the White House on Friday requesting copies of any tapes or other communications between Comey and Trump. And joining me now is California Congressman Ted Lieu. Congressman, thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I want to start with that tweet because a lot of lawyers were interpreting that as potential obstruction of justice or witness tampering. You, sir, are an attorney as well as a member of Congress. I wanted to ask you about it. James Comey better hope there are no tapes of our conversations before he starts leaking to the press. In your view, is that either in the political sort of impeachment sense or in the legal sense obstruction of justice or witness tampering?
It could be, but I believe the firing of FBI Director Comey is obstruction of justice, because the president essentially admitted that he fired Comey because of the Russia probe. And what really bothers me is the Trump administration's disrespect for the rule of law. You've got the Attorney General who lied before Congress. You have Michael Flynn and Jared Kushner submitting false and misleading security clearance forms. None of this is okay.
Yeah, and you're probably too young to remember the impeachment of Bill Clinton. You certainly weren't in Congress at the time, but I want to go back just for a moment. And because impeachment is a political process, it really actually isn't a legal process. There is a trial that takes place in the Senate once articles of impeachment are come out, but it starts in the House. The House is who actually files articles. And I want to go back and look at the impeachment articles against Bill Clinton. These were the Articles 1 and 2. There were 4 counts total. Articles 1 and 2 were that Bill Clinton allegedly corrupted and manipulated the judicial process of the United States for his personal gain and exoneration. Okay, corrupted the judicial process for his personal gain. That was 1 and 2. Article 3 was that he engaged personally and through his subordinates and agents in a course of conduct or scheme designed to delay, impede, cover up, and conceal the existence of evidence and testimony related to a federal civil rights action brought against him. Okay? Delay, impede, cover up, and conceal. Article 4 was that he engaged in conduct that resulted in the misuse and abuse of his high office, impaired the due proper administration of justice and the conduct of lawful inquiries, and contravened the authority of the legislative branch and the truth-seeking purpose of a coordinate investigative proceeding. A lot of that sounds like what Donald Trump is engaged in. Does it sound like it to you?
It does, but keep in mind Richard Nixon's impeachment, the first article was obstruction of justice. And I think that also provides a very relevant experience to look at, because in that case, Richard Nixon fired people who were investigating him. That's exactly what Donald Trump did with the firing of Director Comey.
Yeah, and yet the head of the body in which you serve, Congressman Lieu, is refusing to do anything about it, even to respond to what Donald Trump is tweeting, as you respond to and other Democrats do daily. This is Speaker Ryan, according to Jake Tapper over at CNN, saying I've decided I'm not going to comment on the tweets of the day or the hour. He's essentially dismissed even the idea that he, as Speaker of the House, should even talk about what Donald Trump is doing. Do you see any chance that the leader of the House of Representatives or the leadership of the House will do anything at all to constrain the president?
Not right now, but it's starting to change. We have Republican Justin Amash out of Michigan saying there should be an independent commission to look into the Trump-Russia activities. You've got Darrell Issa out of Southern California saying there should be a special prosecutor. And you're seeing more and more Republicans now start to put country above party. And I think eventually we're going to get to the truth.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, even Jason Chaffetz, who went from saying he couldn't look his 15-year-old daughter in the eye and vote for Donald Trump to being Donald Trump's, full supporter, or some would say maybe a bit of his lackey, to saying that even he has called for the Department of Justice to expand the Russia probe. So there is some movement. But I guess one of the things that people are sort of saying is that the reason that your colleagues on the other side of the aisle won't move is the polls. Let's take a look at Gallup's approval ratings by party for Donald Trump, if we have that. This is May 1st through the 7th. Republicans give Donald Trump an 84% approval rating. Everyone else, he's got nothing. He's got 40% of independents, 9 Democrats. The average is 42, which is an historical low. But in your view, as long as that 84 at the top of that screen, as long as he's at 84% with Republicans, do you foresee Republicans ever impeaching somebody who their own voters support?
I do not. That's why the midterm elections in a year and a half are so important. Let me just give you 2 words why they're important. Subpoena power. If the Democrats control the House, we can control the subpoenas. That means we can do a real investigation and demand documents and have witnesses come and testify. That's why the midterm elections are so important in a year and a half.
Yep, 2 words, subpoena power. Keep it in mind, voters. Congressman Ted Lieu, thank you very much as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. And coming up, Trump takes his distraction campaign to the campus of Liberty University. That's next.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.